So 1977's other science fiction blockbuster is one that also never felt entirely complete by the film's writer and director Steven Spielberg, and so over the years, multiple re-eds were issued to try to appease his original vision. So let's go ahead and explore the numerous versions of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So Steven Spielberg's wondrous and highly acclaimed box office smash follow-up to Jaws was a long-held passion project for the writer-director, melding together his belief of life existing beyond the stars and government suspicion stemming from the recent Watergate scandal resulted in $288 million worldwide success, the highest-grossing film in Columbia Pictures history up to that point, fueled by a $19 million budget. Really just showed the fact that Spielberg, after Jaws, was already almost an instant classic. So this guy would be sticking around, making fantastic films for a long period of time, and just a fantastic film. Actually discovering it kind of recently, because I watched the film once like over a decade ago. It really didn't do much for me at the time, but now that I've gone ahead with this project and really sat down and really absorbed this film, there's such great stuff in the entire film. Like, one, fantastic special effects from Douglas Trumbull, and a whole host of fantastic technicians. Wonderful cast, brilliant characters, rich story, excellent visuals from Vilmos Sigmund, who won an Oscar for his work on the film, and just a really fantastic piece of work that just such a cinematic experience. If you ever got to see it on the big screen, definitely would awe and amaze any audiences whatsoever. So wonderful type of stuff, and definitely got a lot of acclaim when it came out. Of course, the box office spoke well of it, coming out at the end of 1977. Where it was a little bit of a thing where we get into kind of the complications of what resulted in multiple edits of this film being made. Is the fact that, it got $19.4 million for the budget. It's still a very ambitious film. There's a lot of stuff going on in the entire film that's somewhat complicated. Not as complicated as Jaws, with Spielberg shooting on the water and all those random, just mechanical and personnel things. So many things that taught Spielberg never to shoot a film on the water ever again. But the fact is, there's a lot of stuff going on in the film, and the fact is that even though they gave him that much money, Columbia was in dire straits. Like, if they did not get this film out in time, they were risking going out of business. They were in that bad of a shape in that regard. So, like, you're giving this hot director who came off of a Best Picture nomination, all that type of stuff from Jaws, giving him a really kind of ambitious, kind of visionary film to go off of, very much a film that he's very much passionate about, and trying to kind of like bank your entire company on. And the fact is, Spielberg originally wanted to get it out for like summer of 1978, but it's like, okay, we need this thing out by the end of the year for our own financial survival in that regard. So Spielberg didn't quite get quite as much time, probably with the edit. Some things he wanted to shoot they didn't get to do, some things maybe with some of the effects they couldn't get done in time. And so as you go along the entire thing, even though, like I said, Theatrical comes out, big success, fairly well regarded, but some people still felt like there was maybe a few detriments to the film in some places here and there. But just the fact that, okay, didn't quite get exactly what he wanted. There's some things he shot and get cut out and stuff like that, just like not enough time to really kind of sit with it and work with it and kind of refine it to the way he wanted to. And so, different things that stem from that whole thing. So, when you get up to these numerous versions of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, we got three main versions to talk about. We got the original theatrical cut, which was released in November of 1977, the special edition, which gets released 3 years later in August of 1980, and what is now known as the Director's Cut, debuting on Collector's Edition, Laserdisc, and VHS in the late 90s, and of its DVD debut in the early 2000s. But after the film's initial highly successful theatrical release, Columbia Pictures is a very good financial standing. Spielberg has another hit, so he's got more clout. And so after things kind of settle on the entire thing, is the fact that, okay, now we got things in a certain stance. Let me see if it actually fund me going back, kind of finishing the film the way I really wanted to do the whole thing. And so to get the $1.5 million to do the version he wanted, there's something he had to agree to that definitely regrets in retrospect. The fact that Columbia was like, okay, we need a marketing hook for this special edition. Something people really want to come back to see in particular. And so they had to make him agree to shoot the sequence at the end of the film where Richard Dreyfuss' character of Roy Neary goes inside the mothership to show the interior of the ship to sell the audience, because home video is not a reality yet. The theatrical experience is what you have to bank this on. This is what you're going to release it to. This is where you're going to recoup your money right now. So they have to drive people back into theaters for a marketing hook. And so, begrudgingly, Spielberg goes ahead and does this, but I'll talk much more into that once it comes up in the detailing the additions, alterations to the film as we go along with this version. But a lot of things are kind of extensions. Like the entire thing, the first thing that gets altered with the film is an extension early on in the film where we get introduced to Roy Neary and his family. Just a little thing of him talking with one of his sons, talking about his homework and fractions. Do something to kind of motivate him to kind of figure out his own homework himself. He's got this entire model train thing. It kind of sets up an entire like train crash roadblock type of things. Like, okay, he wants him to figure out the fraction problem before the trains collide or whatnot. So it's a clever little thing. It's like a little bit of a character work up front with the entire family, just talking about his wife Ronnie, talking about like, hey, you said you'd take the kids out and the family out to go see a movie this weekend and stuff like that. And they started talking about, oh, Pinocchio, that's a great film. You guys are going to love this thing, all that type of stuff here and there. So it kind of shows a little bit more of the character overall. It's a really nice scene that shows that kind of progression of the family life from something like that to where it goes later on, where Roy becomes very much obsessed and manic and very much off the deep end with this entire whole thing that goes on with the entire alien encounter and the whole thing. But after that, it's a little bit of removal that gets removed from all future versions of the film, because originally in the theatrical cut, we got Roy Neary going off to his job at the power plant. And this entire sequence where he's talking with his co-workers and his boss and all the different things about what's been going on with these blackouts and all that type of stuff here. And Spielberg apparently decided that was kind of busy work that really didn't need to be in the film. Probably some shoe leather that kind of like, it's kind of there, but it doesn't really need to be there as much. It doesn't inform as much about the film that we don't already know as much about already. So he kind of decided to remove it for this version and the future director's cut in that regard. But added to the entire thing is this little thing where as Roy's driving along and he gets stopped at the train tracks, the beam comes down and all the things get shaken around and all the weird stuff just happens to him, and he goes chasing after this entire object in the sky or whatnot. He added this one little shot, overhead wide shot of Roy's car driving along in the big shadow of the ship going over the entire landscape. So that's an interesting little added shot to give a little more a tease, a little more anticipation to see what's going on in the entire film, what we're going to build up to in a little bit here. And they also added a little thing going on where after all the ships kind of pass by the entire road there, where everyone's kind of conglomerated at this little place here, kind of waiting for this entire experience to kind of unfold for themselves, and one of them kind of passes by and it actually stops, and we get this kind of close-up shot of it shining a light on a McDonald's billboard on the side of the road. So it's a interesting little extra effects shot that doesn't add too much to it, and it's kind of arbitrary whether or not it really adds anything to yourself and whatnot about the sequence there. But the big type of thing is the fact that, aside from the ending of the entire film that we added in the whole thing, Spielberg was actually given money to actually shoot some additional sequences for the film that didn't get realized in the original production. And one of those is the Gobi Desert sequence, where they find the Cotopaxi freighter in the middle of the desert. It's just an image I've always kind of had been imprinted upon me, and the fact that it's from the later version of the film, not the original version, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's like it's just an image that just kind of popped up here and there throughout the years. Whenever people kind of talked about the film or got referenced or something like that, there's a very particular sequence of like a very great shot, because it's a great type of thing that Bob Balaban, fantastic character. I love him in this movie alongside Francois Truffaut, fantastic French director apparently who plays the entire character Lacombe. These two, I love them in the film. Fantastic pairing. But the fact is, Balaban said like the way they shot this was forced perspective. The freighter is this little model in the foreground. They have all the actors very much like far in the background. They kind of mirror the scale of the entire shot together. Wonderful type of stuff, like just smart filmmaking to not have to do like an optical composite or some weird thing in that regard. It's like it's just a smart piece of work that was definitely cost effective in that regard. And so wonderful type of thing. Just I really like what that adds to the building mystery you have here. All those characters of Lachlan and Lacombe kind of going through the entire process, first in Africa, now over to Mongolia and over to India, all these little things, building up their end of the story here, finding these weird occurrences, all these things being plopped down in weird places in the world or whatnot, and all these interesting encounters all these people are reporting throughout the entire world, like, just adds a little extra something to it. And after this, we go back to the Neary household in the morning, and there's a little bit of trim at the end of the sequence where Roy kind of lays on the bed and sees the kind of shape of the pillow, which later on we understand is the shape emulating that of Devil's Tower. But after this, we get a little bit of a rearrangement of scenes to a certain degree, because I probably feel like Spielberg wanted to rebalance a little bit of things, because you add that Gobi Desert sequence to kind of rebalance the entire kind of intercutting of storylines here. So this second encounter everyone has with, like, Roy Neary and Jillian, all those people on the side of the road there, they go back there the next night, gets moved a little bit further into the film, because it's after the India sequence and Lacombe's sort of conference there where he's showing everyone the hand signals, which does get a little bit of an extension at the end of the entire sequence where everyone's standing up and applauding him. This gets the entire thing of now the second encounter where the helicopters come in, all the type of stuff. But the next alteration doesn't happen until after Jillian's son Barry gets abducted, and the entire wonderful, beautiful sequence shot by Vilmos Siegel with those brilliant lights. Like, I can't possibly imagine this guy not have won that Best Cinematography Oscar, because this film looks absolutely stunningly gorgeous. But after that sequence, they removed the entire press conference and the meeting at the U.S. Air Force Base. It's completely gone from this version. So I kind of didn't realize until, like, a little bit later on in the film, like, wait a minute, that sequence is gone now. I felt that was a kind of a good sequence to have in the film. So it's an interesting thing for Spielberg at that point in time to excise that scene from the film, which I felt like did a little bit of an extra building on the story to a certain degree. Just adds a little more bonding of Jillian and Roy Neary and kind of the intertwining of the government story with everything else in that regard. Feels like losing it just feels like it loses a little bit of a cog in the story that doesn't quite get tied together until much, much later on in the film in that regard. And then after this, there's a little bit of a trim here, because there's a sequence later on where the entire Neary family sits down at the table, and it's the mashed potato sequence. This removes a little bit of a chunk of the introduction scene of Roy walking in and sitting down, and have a little bit of a chatter here and there, but it's not too consequential in that regard. But one particular addition was something that was shot in the original production, but did not make it into the original theatrical cut. And that's the entire sequence of Roy Neary in the shower, like fully clothed, and having this kind of emotional breakdown to a certain degree, like he's kind of knowingly being driven crazy about everything that's going on, and his entire family just completely explodes. They're all just having this manic moment between one another, like the rest of the family can't deal with what the hell he's going through, and he doesn't really know what it is. He's trying to claw and grab it, trying to rationalize what the heck's actually happening inside his head in this whole situation here, and wife isn't taking it well, the kids are not taking it well overall. It's a really great sequence. It's an emotionally powerful sequence that easily rolls into the next day, all the type of things when she packs up the kids, just leaves without even getting out of the pajamas and everything like that. It's a really good thing it's a great scene. Great type of thing overall. But little things get kind of tweaked from this point onwards. The next morning, when Roy starts kind of like ripping all the shrubbery out, and he's kind of building up the entire thing inside the house, there's kind of the sculpture of Devil's Tower inside the house, so much gets removed. Like, all that stuff really gets chopped out of the entire special edition here. It just goes from the shower sequence and the fight with the family at night to Roy waking up to the clay sculpture and pulling the head off the entire thing, and then Ronnie going off and absconding with the kids, and then into Roy with the giant sculpture inside the entire living room. The entire sequence there just completely removed from this version of the film, which again feels like it's just another part of the progression of the character, just showing that manic downward spiral that just completely breaks the entire family there. I feel like that's such a crucial part of the entire trajectory of the character there, that to kind of lose it just feels like it makes it a lesser version of the film, which a lot of people do regard this version of the film as the lowest quality version of the entire film, because scenes like this get removed, even though we add some other things that kind of add to the story. Some things get kind of gutted out in some place here that feel a little baffling why they were chosen to be removed in this regard. But the ending of the sequence where Ronnie drives off with the kids, and Roy falls off the entire hood of the car, gets cut off there, so you don't get the entire thing of him walking back into the house and climbing back inside because we removed the entire front end of the sequence. Kind of makes less sense to have the back end of it where he's kind of falling off the entire thing of throwing all the dirt and all the crap in the entire house. So that gets removed, and there's some minor little edits where he's kind of looking back out through the window of the house at all the other families in the neighborhood just being families in that regard, just kind of mulling over his recent decisions, what this thing's going to lead him towards, and broken up his family in. They just trim out a couple of shots here and there from the sequence to just make it a little bit shorter overall. Move over to the entire thing where after he realizes the entire thing of Devil's Tower, that's what I've been seeing, that's what I've been building, that's been what I've been obsessing of. He's got to drive over to Wyoming, and he got an entire thing of everyone being evacuated, all that type of stuff. And there's some changes of shots here, like alternate shots put on the whole thing where they got the entire thing of talking about the gas masks and various other things like that are added into this version. And then after that, there's a particular scene removed here that stars Carl Weathers as a Border Patrol agent, kind of giving a hard time to Roy Neary as he's talking about the entire situation here, where the government's kind of unknown but known to Roy Neary as staged his entire sort of chemical spill, whatnot, to kind of get everyone out of the area while this entire close encounter is going to happen here. But after this, a little bit of a removal here, after he got the entire thing where everyone kind of gets crowded into the base there at Devil's Tower, and after they've been questioned by Lacombe, Lachlan, and all the other people here and there, and the entire thing of them all being on the helicopter, and we're going to be taken away, but you have Roy, you have Jillian, and the other guy, Larry, decide to abscond and jump off and actually fight their way through sort of a army guy, whatnot, to get off the helicopter. Well, that little shot of them fighting against that army guy is removed from this version of the film here, but all we have after this point is the fact of that ending that Spielberg was a bit begrudging about doing, because definitely in retrospect, Spielberg has gone at lengths to tell people that was a mistake to add this entire sequence after everything that's happened in the entire climax of the entire film here, the entire visitation, the wonderful communication back and forth, all that type of stuff. Everything forced him to show the inside of the mothership as Roy Neary enters it. Now, I'm going to say, it's a well done sequence, designed very well, special effects are fantastic, cinematography is still on point, all the elements of technical qualities are still very much on point, but Spielberg, again, in retrospect, says he feels that that interior of the mothership should have been the exclusive property of the audience's imagination. And I entirely agree with that. I feel like this robs the ending a little bit of something. To add that in there feels like you're just robbing that awe and that wonder and that, again, that imagination of the audience. Like, oh man, that's, can't imagine what he's going to go through on this journey. He's going to be going off of all that type of stuff. So like, just like pulls it back from the audience. Kind of like, oh, it's nothing that I feel like it needed to happen. And Spielberg, again, definitely doesn't feel like that needed to happen either, but they need a marketing hook to get the entire thing going into the theaters and get people out. And this thing eventually grows, by all the theatrical re-releases, grows at least another, I think, about $20 million or so. I think it got well over $300 million at the box office at the end of the day after all these decades. And so definitely drove people back in to kind of go off that regard. But it's the interesting type of thing, the fact that as we conclude this thing on the special edition here, there is the fact that this became the dominant version on home video. This is the version that debuts on all home video formats in 1981. You've got VHS, Laser, you probably got Betamax, you got CED, you got VHE, all these different things across the board of everything that came up on home video as a competing format. It all got the special edition version in pan and scan, of course. Now that's their thing that permeated throughout the entire 80s. That's the only version you could own through the entire decade of the 1980s was the special edition. Now, of course, there were TV versions that kind of married elements of both different cuts together. Apparently and supposedly, both versions kind of just got thrown together completely. All scenes in reinstated and thrown in there together just probably to maximize the sort of ad space they could get on the primetime network debut and all that type of stuff. And that was just a common practice back in the 1980s with films like Star Trek the Motion Picture or Superman the Movie, where they just throw a bunch of deleted scenes back in the film to expand the runtime out to maximize their ad revenue dollars for the network television premiere, despite the fact that most of these were not approved by the actual directors themselves, but we move past the 20th anniversary of Close Encounters to 1998, where Spielberg revisits the film again for a new edit with a brand new 5.1 Dolby Digital AC3 surround mix for the collector's edition release. Now, this would end up being known as the director's cut later on. Now, the entire thing is the fact that we're going to compare what's been changed from the 1980 special edition up to this one. So it's an easier way to avoid me having to reiterate all the other stuff and kind of just show what's been changed from one thing to the next moving forward and how he reassessed and changed his mind about what he did from 1980 up to 1998. Now, the first thing has been the fact that most things are getting restored back to the original theatrical version. Like the entire thing of when they have the first encounter up on that roadside, remove the entire shot of the close-up of the McDonald's billboard. It's been returned back to the original edit from the 1977 theatrical version. But also the entire thing is the fact that Lacomb's conference, where he's speaking with everyone and showing the hand signals, all that type of stuff, is also returned back to the original theatrical length. So the little kind of extension for the special edition, where everyone stands up and they're applauding him and stuff like that, has been removed here. But particularly restored from the original theatrical version is the entire press conference and meeting at the U.S. Air Force Base. So that entire sequence where I said it felt like a very necessary cod to start intertwining the different stories here of the government officials and all the sort of witnesses of the entire close encounter there was very much restored for this one. So everything that Spielberg thought back on, like, yeah, that feels like a much more necessary point in the trajectory of the story here to reintegrate into the entire film here. And restored as well is Roy Neary ripping up his yard, throwing the shrubbery around, tossing all the dirt in the house, and of course at the end of the entire sequence where she drives all the kids, back is the entire thing of him getting up and climbing into the house through the window. All of it's restored from the original theatrical version in that regard. And of course, as obvious was for this version, Spielberg completely removed the interior of the entire mothership. That sequence is gone entirely. So, not a lot of changes. But like we still keep like the Gobi Desert sequence. You keep the entire thing of Roy Neary in the shower and having that argument with the entire family there. All those things are very much positive additions from the special edition and carried over here, which is these few little restorations they kind of cut out in 1980 and felt like, no, let's go back to this thing. Or kind of like stuff he kind of extended back then and felt like, no, the original theatrical version was the best version of that for himself at the time he did the 1998 director's cut of the film. Now, like I said, Spielberg still feels today like, it still feels like a film not entirely 100% exactly right, but it's not like he's going to go back and do another one. It's like he feels like he's able to kind of like stop and feel like, I've done as much as I feel I can. I'm not going to obsess over this for decades on end and kind of keep tweaking things overall. He's not going to go in that route. This is good enough. This is a solid enough version. It gets rid of that ending he really regretted putting in 1980 and kind of just restores a few things that feels like they're kind of necessary building blocks in the story for emotional purposes, character purposes, and kind of the overall narrative together to intertwine everything together by the end of the film. So, personally, as I watch all these over the course of about 2 months or so, a couple weeks in between each version in that regard to kind of like sink in, feel about it, think about it here and there, I feel like I do prefer the director's cut. Director's cut is the fullest, not the fullest one overall, because obviously we still truncate some things, excise some stuff here and there, but I feel like satisfying wise and as an experience overall, I feel like it has the most for myself. I feel like on the most part I'd probably go back to the director's cut, but maybe the theatrical cut as well, but the special edition would definitely be the lowest one on the rung for myself in that regard. But definitely like to hear what you guys feel about each version in that regard. But we do have to dictate what exactly the home video history is in terms of what versions of the films landed on what releases that were put out on various video formats. Thankfully, since the film's 30th anniversary release in 2007 on DVD and Blu-ray, all three versions of the film have been readily available on home video, with a 4K release arriving in 2017. This third time, their things were a lot more scattershot. Like I said, back in the 1980s, the special edition was the only version available on home video. Couldn't get anything else. It wasn't until 1990 that the Criterion Collection enters the picture, gives the film its first widescreen release, and first a triple gatefold version, but they got some complaints from customers about the quality of that packaging, so they switched over to a box set version later on. But it's kind of interesting because they got a bunch of bonus features like still galleries, deleted scenes, and some interesting interviews to a degree in terms of like how they're presented, because with Laserdisc you had multiple audio tracks. You could switch between different things here and there for usually like the main audio or like a commentary track, but in this case they utilized it in a very different fashion because they made a lot of split screen interviews. You'd have one interviewee on the left side of the screen and one on the right side of the screen, so you kind of had to sit through like one interview with one audio track and then backtrack, switch the audio to the other track and listen to the other interview, and that's fairly clunky. I can guess that they probably like had enough stuff to fill an extra disc, but didn't want to put forth the cost for it, so they kind of did this entire workaround sort of thing to be kind of innovative and smart towards it. But I feel like it just creates a little bit more of a disjointed experience, and kind of just clunky is the kind of word to express for this entire release and how they tried to utilize the technology at the time to achieve these different things, especially with the fact they're trying to put both the theatrical cut and the special edition on the same discs, but by way of having to program different chapter stops into your player by way of your remote if your actual player supported that. And so you'd have to kind of go forward, and like if you want to watch the special edition, you have to do that. Theatrical would kind of play basically without any kind of horsing around on the whole thing, but apparently wasn't 100% the original 1977 release. It's like a shot or two that gets kind of swapped out or kind of transplanted into here from the special edition, such as the shadow of the spacecraft at night floating over the landscape of Indiana there. So a few little things got kind of mucked around. Apparently like the original pressing and the whole thing had some errors with the coding of the different chapters and stuff like that. They reissued it, but they didn't kind of clear up all the issues. So like I said, it's a bit of a clunky, kind of crude way of kind of approaching that idea. It's like, it's kind of the only way they could do it without having to press two different sets of discs and make it like a 6 or 7 disc box set or something like that. Be just prohibitively expensive to do that whole thing. So they tried this sort of technological workaround for it. And so looking back on it now, many years after Laserdisc is no longer a real viable format in terms of like modern things in that regard, it's not really the best way to kind of go about having to watch the film. So as Close Encounters of the Third Kind became the number 125 entry in the Criterion Collection, the following year they issued a 125A version of the entire thing, which is much more stripped down, none of the bonus material, and just their version of the original theatrical cut of the film. Now, in 1994, Columbia reissues the special edition on Laserdisc in widescreen, but it ends up being a DADC plant pressing, which were very prone to laser rot, so not the version to get if you want the special edition. The most reliable release in that regard would probably be the Japanese version of the special edition in widescreen. But come 1998, they get the collector's edition, which includes the brand new director's cut of the film with, again, a no 5.1 Dolby Digital AC3 surround mix, no bonus features, new making of featurettes, all the different things. So pretty much everything that's on the Blu-rays and 4Ks and now came up from that 1998 release, which is a Pioneer USA pressing. So pretty much a good solid thing to get if you're interested in that version on Laserdisc to grab that one up. But like I said, after that in 2001 you get the DVD debut with anamorphic widescreen of that collector's edition release. And so after that, going forward, you get all the different cuts available in all the different formats, DVD, Blu-ray, 4K. It's a great type of thing to see that preservation finally come up so long into the entire life of the entire film here. But it's just a great thing that, at least for this film, Spielberg decided, yes, let's finally just get everything together, put all the footage in the right versions, all the type of stuff, and just preserve all 3 cuts of the film and let the fans decide exactly which versions they want to watch and not quite dictate as much which ones they should watch. And it's something that some other filmmakers don't do as much. Some other filmmakers decide to actually kind of ingratiate themselves, like Ridley Scott with Blade Runner and various other cuts he's made to different films and stuff like that. But it doesn't apply to the other film that Spielberg went back and kind of did some late touch-ups to in terms of E.T., where that extended version has been relegated to a limited edition DVD that's over 20 years old and out of print now. So that might be a topic for another time, but Close Encounters just really absorbing this film at this point in time. It's such a magnificent film. It really is. It's so rich with ideas, optimism. It's like it just has such a wonder and awe to it that it's kind of hard to achieve sometimes these days. Like you have to have a really fantastic, just mind-blowing vision for a film to really kind of just impact audiences on the level that this film definitely did back in 1977 and has since. There's so much of the great quality of what the building blocks of what you know Spielberg would become in the years following this. Just that really great level of imagination and embracing of certain sentiments overall in the whole thing. And I just love the themes overall. The themes of communication between different cultures. Like, it permeates through the entire film. You have the entire relationship between Lachlan and Lacombe there. The translator and the Frenchman kind of going back and forth and trying to bridge the gap between their cultures and go to like India, and they have to bridge the gap of their culture to their culture and all that type of stuff back and forth up to learning this kind of melodic language to communicate with the aliens and everything like that. It's all this great type of stuff, and it's a wonderful piece of work overall. And just like Richard Dreyfuss was so absolutely perfect in the role of Roy Neary. He has that blue-collar everyman feel to him, with that great sense of radiance of what he's going through in the entire film, as he's imprinted with this idea of the Devil's Tower and where to be, when to be there, all the type of stuff, and just like how it just slightly drives him mad. And Spielberg has kind of commented the fact like he wouldn't make this film later on as he did back then, because back then he was young, he was optimistic, he was kind of, this guy is like willing to sacrifice different things for the vision he has and stuff like that, and be kind of reckless to a certain degree. Or like Roy Neary, he just abandons his family. Just like he just lets it all go to waste in that regard for this one obsession he has. Definitely as Spielberg ended up become a family man and have kids, all that type of stuff later in his life, definitely has much more of a different concrete sense of what is valuable to him in life beyond just the obsession. There's a lot of other complexities to a man as he goes older or whatnot to kind of look back on the film, but as he said, stuff that feels like it's maybe still not entirely 100% exactly what he would want it to be, but he's willing to let it sit and settle and kind of be what it is now and not kind of go off and obsessively tinker with the entire thing. But I just think there's so many great things. Of course, you can't even not talk about the John Williams score, which is absolutely brilliant. Just so much a great, it encapsulates such the amazing enlightenment of the entire film in his tones in the entire film, just sweeping it all around. The fact that I've seen this comes out in 1977 as I started the entire video, coming out in the shadow of Star Wars, which again is John Williams. It's all this science fiction, special effects type of thing. So it got a little bit overshadowed, got kind of his glory taken away from a little bit from Star Wars, which absolutely deserved the awards it got, with the sound and the editing and the special effects and the music, all that type of stuff. But definitely if this thing got a little bit more removed from 77, maybe 78 or something like that, maybe it could have gotten those awards for itself in that regard. But such a fantastic piece of work that Spielberg just really hit a stamp, really cemented his footprint after Jaws, showed that this guy's a player, but now this guy's here to stay, and he's got some amazing things to share with us with his own vision. So Close Encounters, I think, is one of the Spielberg films that gets a little, I don't know, feels a little overlooked. People kind of like jump from Jaws to E.T., then Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, stuff like that. This is like Close Encounters gets brought up enough as a discussion point, or things in science fiction or whatnot. It feels like there's a lot of things going on, especially in the late 70s. After this, you get Superman the movie, you got Alien, you got all the different things popping up throughout the 80s in the entire genre that gets very much a fast, rapid fire sort of output and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about in the genre at this point in time, but I think Close Encounters deserves a very strong place in the conversation of science fiction at this point in time. But I'd like to hear what you guys feel about the film itself, and which version of the film maybe you saw first, which one you kind of grew up with, but which one you like the most, which one does hit the spot exactly on the money for yourselves, guys. So thank you so much for watching this deconstruction of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Definitely hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't, super thanks feature, hit the hype after you hit the like button to really kind of help this entire thing punch up on the algorithms. Then it helps a whole lot, but commenting, guys, interacting with the channel, sharing links around, help extremely much. So guys, thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.